Welcome, welcome, welcome in, beautiful souls. Welcome, welcome, welcome back. If you're back here, that means you actually like me and I like you too. Whether you're here live or catching the replay, I am so glad and grateful that you are here. You could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here. I'm Brittany, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I am a real woman who is living this work and helping others to do the same so they can become who they are truly meant to be in this life. Tonight we're diving into chapter 2 of Becoming Supernatural. I took the liberty of recording parts 1 through 3 because I like to break it up in digestible sections for anybody who's watching. I don't like things that are too drawn out. I lose focus. I feel you. So, this chapter is called The Present Moment, and it's where Dr. Joe Dispenza begins to explain how we actually start to make real, lasting change from the inside out. And as just some house rules, I engage. So please do engage in the comments. Let me know where you're joining us from. And drop any questions that you may have along the way, anything that piques your interest. I speak back and we can all learn and grow from one another. Without further ado, let's start off with part 1. And ooh, nice little fly in my section. But the present moment and the past becomes a future loop. This is basically what Dr. Joe Dispenza breaks down in part 1. And so, some of the key talking points that he mentions is that most people live in survival mode. And this is when they're thinking about the past or they're worrying about the future. If you can identify with that, which I absolutely can, please drop a comment in the comment section or drop a heart in the comment section so I know that these are my people. These are the ones who I'm speaking to and who this message spoke to. He also says that we wake up every day and immediately step into an emotional memory of who we were yesterday. And if I can recall, this morning I woke up scanning my environment for what is familiar, what I have to do on my to do list, uh, what emails I need to send, what things I left undone yesterday that I need to tackle so that I don't fall behind. All the things, right, that reaffirm our identity of who we think we are based on our experiences. Yeah, we do that immediately upon waking up. Dr. Joe says that if you keep thinking and feeling the same way, your past will become your future. And so I want to talk a little bit about each of these different points that Dr. Joe brings up in part 1. And just to give us a better foundation for what he was really trying to bring into our awareness. So it's true that most of us unconsciously live in the emotions and thoughts of our past because he says by the age 35, we're already hardwired and conditioned into an emotional set point, meaning we already have a set of patterns of who we think we are, right? We already have some hardwired beliefs. And once you get to that point and you recognize that some of those things no longer serve you, that's when you have to get into the process of unlearning what you learned. And we all come to that point at some phase of our journey, right? He says that every morning we do wake up and immediately recall our problems, our pain, and our routines. Just by scientific definition of how our brains work, this is something that we all find ourselves doing, right? And our body remembers how to feel whatever we've conditioned it to. So whether that's guilt, fear, worry, and the emotional state conditions us to think the same thoughts and take the same actions. And I actually took some notes from something that he said that I thought was super cool. Um, he basically talked about when we experience a highly charged emotional state, whether it's bad or good, that moment becomes embossed neurologically in our brain as a memory. And I thought that was so fascinating because when you think about it, how do you remember things? You remember things that made you feel a certain way. The things that made you feel nothing, you probably don't remember. But the things that made you feel something, you remember. And I remember when I was younger, I heard a quote where someone says, people may not remember what you say to them, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And that's because that's what a memory is, how it made you feel. right? And then he then goes on to say that it's safe to say that the only place the past actually exists is in your brain and in your body. Because again, your emotion is a chemical reaction in your body that you are having as a response to whatever you're thinking or whatever you're doing. So our memories really truly exist as emotions stored in our bodies. And imagine if you're living from memories of the past that are full of trauma, right? So now you're carrying that emotional trauma in your body. And that is a big deal because it affects how we exist. And so if you're living by the same emotions every day, you're thinking in the past and creating the same predictable future. This is what Dr. Joe said, and I highlighted this quote. So for me, of course, this was very eye opening because I realized that even when I was saying the affirmations, setting the goals, all the things, my body was still stuck in survival mode. I think I can recall the moment that I recognized I had a pattern that no longer was serving me because I wanted to get rid of the pattern. And I actually remember speaking about it to someone that I cared about. And I was like, listen, there's this pattern that keeps coming up for me and it's very painful. And I no longer want to have this pattern, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to stop it. And I had read all the books. I was very well versed in all the manifestation teachers and masters. I'm talking Neville, I'm talking Ernest Holmes, Florence Scovel Shinn, Joseph Murphy, all the things. Intellectually, I was that good. I knew it, right? But I couldn't stop my body from reacting emotionally. And that's when I knew I was in trouble. And I knew that if I continued that way, something was going to happen. And this was before I even knew about Dr. Joe's work. So when I had that epiphany, I sent out what Abraham and Esther Hicks like to say, a strong rocket of desire, because I needed to fix something that I wasn't equipped to fix. I didn't know how. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do to fix this dilemma of the pattern that I recognized I had because I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the knowledge. And thank goodness for people like Dr. Joe coming along and basically giving the blueprint. But I was literally living in survival mode. And the survival energy was recreating the same cycles over and over again, even when I wanted something new. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you can relate to this as well. Because I feel like we all have something, right? Like we all know ourselves. By the time we're a certain age, we know ourselves well enough to know what's getting in the way. And we know ourselves well enough to know that you might have dreams and visions that are beyond this pattern that has you in a chokehold. And that version of you doesn't live by these emotions that you're currently living by or that you lived by in the past. And so that was huge for me. That was huge for me. And then lo and behold, the universe, God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it, brought the teachings of Dr. Joe to me. And I talked about that in another live presentation. So go back to the playlist and you'll hear my story about how I manifested Dr. Joe. But this is something that I thought was really critical in part one to wake us up to, because we're doing some things that we have more control over than we realize. Yeah. So, how many of you have ever felt like you're stuck in a loop, no matter what you do, that the same emotional patterns keep coming back? That's where I was. That's the story I just told. I had someone who actually asked a question. As I mentioned before, I do have people submit questions ahead of my lives because it helps things flow better. And no matter when you're watching this, you can possibly benefit from it. This person said, what if I know I'm stuck in the past, but I don't know how to move forward? Girl, do what I did. Dr. Joe, that's exactly why I'm doing these live discussions, why I'm actually uploading pre-recorded videos of me reading the book, because I know so many more people can help themselves get unstuck with this information. And they probably, a lot of people aren't going to crack open this book. They just not, like, a lot of people aren't going to crack open this book. And I know that. And even those who are, like, repetition is the foundation of all learning. So if you've read this book before and you're joining me, that's what we do. College teaches you how to learn. You repeat the same information over and over again until you really get it. And so we're studying. This is what I'm gonna call it, a study group. I like that. You're studying. But yeah, so the key is to just bring your awareness to the present moment, as Dr. Joe talks about in chapter 2, the beginning of chapter 2, because the present moment is the only true place that you have real power, right? Because if you think about it, when you're thinking about the past, your memory is being brought up in the present moment. And when you're thinking about the future, you're projecting something that hasn't happened yet into the present moment. So the power is in the present moment, right? And so if you can just train yourself to be more present, I think that helps a great deal. And you also have to remember that it took a great amount of time for you to become addicted to the patterns or the emotions that you're addicted to. We all are addicted to our emotional states. It took time to get there. So you got to recognize that it won't all happen at once. It won't necessarily happen overnight. It took time to get this way. So it happens moment by moment, choice by choice, and it happens circumstance by circumstance with person by person. The more you practice, the better you get at it. And so that's what I would say to that. Yeah, guys, that's what I was saying. It gets real. So I'm gonna keep the conversation going. Um, the next part, after he talks about the present moment, he talks about how our past becomes our future. And so in this section, Dr. Joe talks about how our brains don't know the difference between what's real and what is imagined, right? And so he introduces how a real experience or imagined experience can be experienced in the same way as something actually real happening, which is why every time you recall a memory or you bring up something that happened in the past, especially if it was emotionally charged, something traumatic, you are going to create sensations in your body that feel as though that thing is happening right now, that make your body respond in a fight or flight way in this present moment. And we do that unconsciously. So he says that if you do the opposite, meaning when you condition yourself to feel as if your future is already happening, then your body begins to believe that it's real. Because the same way that it works for something traumatic and negative, it works the same way for something positive that you actually want and that you anticipate or that you really desire. And so if you've been doing it one way that hasn't been working, this is a new way to try, right? He says that our body is like an unconscious mind. So we think of the subconscious mind as just being up here, right? Consciousness is within us. And a major part of consciousness is how our body processes this reality. So it's in you, it's in your body. Your body is an unconscious mind. As we go further in the book, Dr. Joe explains how our body, we have chakras or what he calls energy centers. Each of these centers have their own mind that govern different parts of the body. And so that was even fascinating, but we'll get there. We'll get there. And he teaches a formula that elevated emotion plus a clear intention is what equals transformation. And so just understanding this changed how I meditate. I stopped trying to wish things into reality and I started creating the feeling of already having it. And this is what I talk a lot about on my TikTok. You'll see a lot of videos of me talking about living in the end, being in the wish fulfilled, and a lot of that comes from Neville. I also talk a lot about Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks. And I also talk a lot about whoever else inspires me to live it real and live as though I am already her. But more importantly, incorporating the teachings of Dr. Joe into my regimen has allowed me to really fully embody this teaching of living in the end because now I know that the more I teach my body what my future is going to feel like, the more real it starts to believe it. And then I become literally a magnet that draws it onto myself. And that's really what we're doing. So when I practice the feelings of gratitude, joy, peace, love, that's when I start to shift my state. And that's when things begin to unfold in real life. And that's when we talk about things like synchronicities and all of that, the more you feel in alignment with what it is you're calling in, you can even recall in some of your own experiences in life. When you felt more aligned, when you felt like you were surrendering and you just trusted that it was going to, come through for you, whatever that was you were praying for, that was a moment where you were matching the version of you who had it, who already had it. And so the fact that you 9 times out of 10 probably manifested what it is you were praying for, it was because you were matching it vibrationally. You weren't feeling as though you were separate from it. You had claimed it, named it and claimed it, as Helen Hadsell said. She's the contest queen, if you don't know who she is, but you can look her up. But that's when things start to shift. That's when you start seeing the synchronicities, and that's when things really start to click. And you'll really start feeling this work and wanting it to be a part of your day-to-day life. You'll get to a point where you don't even want to miss learning how to tune in with yourself and meditating, because you're going to fall in love with who you become when you meditate. You're going to fall in love with that version of you. And when you don't meditate, you're going to feel the difference. You're going to feel the difference, because when you stop doing the conditioning, it's so easy for you to slip back into old patterns. It's like if you have an addiction to something and you start doing all the things that takes you on a path to not have that addiction, and then all of a sudden you stop. You know how easy it is for you to slip back into those patterns of going back to that addiction? Because the minute you're in a familiar circumstance that can trigger emotions from your past, you're going to go back to what feels safe to your nervous system, and that is what's familiar, what you've been conditioning it to. Even if you're teaching it something new, what feels more familiar, because you've been doing it longer, is the addiction. That's why it's so hard to break a habit. So someone did ask, what if I can't feel those elevated emotions yet? Does that mean it won't work? No, it doesn't mean it won't work. Not at all. In the beginning, your body is naturally going to resist, because its job is to keep you safe and in the known. And what you're trying to teach it is unfamiliar. So it's not going to feel safe. It's going to feel like, nah, I don't want to do this. And so it's not going to be easy. But when you practice, you teach your body that it's okay to linger in the unknown for a little bit. And then once your body relaxes, it's going to start to open up to possibility and creativity. That's very normal. You just keep practicing, keep repeating the elevated state as often as you can, and eventually it will become your new baseline. It's repetition is the king foundation of all learning. You don't get there overnight in terms of your habit, so you won't get there overnight in terms of creating a new habit. And I need you to remember that always and give yourself grace, because we're human. All right. Me and my notes, y'all. So one of the highlight quotes that I took from this chapter is, when you feel the emotion of your future, your body begins to believe that it's already there. Again, what you practice, the subconscious mind, and including the unconscious mind of your body, does not know that you're not having a real experience. So I used to teach public school, and I'm this just a little segue story time. I taught in public schools for several, I won't say several years. I worked in public schools for several years, and I was a teacher for maybe 2 or 3 years, actually about 4 years, something like that. But anyways, one of the things that made me want to leave teaching was that I saw this TED talk, and there was this guy talking about how traditional education, or modern education in the Western world, was literally conditioning our minds away from imagination. It was basically steering us away from our creativity. And at the time, I resonated with that, because I was in a school system that was forcing me to teach a standardized test. And that broke my heart, because I was teaching it in the inner city schools. And I knew that the students from those communities weren't going to, number one, get that information and really retain it like the state or the government wanted them to. And I knew that it was causing them to self label and their peers to also label them. But I also knew that teaching them a test was not going to serve them ever in life. It just wasn't. None of what I was teaching was going to serve them in their lives. And they kind of knew that because a lot of them in that community they had a lot of trauma early on. And it was hard to teach them a lesson about something that they didn't even see as valuable because it just did not connect. It didn't connect. And so when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I think this is what we're doing. We're training them out of their imagination, but it's the one thing that is literally the gateway to the prayers that you've been praying for. Because when you're worried, what are you doing? You're using your imagination to think about the worst case scenario. When you're worried, that is what you're doing. You're catastrophically thinking about your reality. You're anticipating the worst case scenario, and you're using your imagination to do that. But when you're hopeful, when you're trusting, when you're surrendering, you're probably using your imagination to say, well, what if the best case scenario happens? What if? And then you're probably going there and thinking about how you would feel when the best case scenario happens. And that's how it all unfolds. And this is what he calls priming the body, right? So in part two, he says, um, oh no, I already talked about that. But in part two, he says this is what basically priming the body is. It's believing that your future has already happened. So yeah, when you feel the emotions of your future, your body begins to believe it's already there. And this is the heart of the work, to be honest. This is the core of what Dr. Joe is trying to teach through all of his books, all of his courses, all of his workshops. Is when I stopped wishing and started feeling as though my desire was already done, my body responded very differently. And eventually so did my reality. Like things started to shift for me in a way that, somebody could look at me and say, well, you're not the richest. So how does this stuff actually work? When I tell you I am so abundant because I understand that abundance is more than just money, my life is so abundant. I have so much more peace. I have more moments of calm in my body when things come up, when circumstances, unpredictable things shift in my reality. I have so much more clarity and resolve and calm that I never had before because of this work. So I always tell people that your blessings are going to come in ways that you probably haven't even imagined. And the things that you're labeling as like abundance will come in infinite different forms if you allow it to. I have an infinite amount of love in my life. I have an infinite amount of, opportunities. Like I feel so abundant, even on the surface that things look like they may not be working. I have so much trust in my existence and in my experience and in the unfolding of everything because of this work. It was the missing piece to the puzzle to what I already knew spiritually. And that is how to work with my body. And this brings me to the next part, which is part three, making genetic changes, where Dr. Joe breaks down how we are not doomed by our genes. And I'm so glad he talked about this because I mentioned before I work in the healthcare field and there's so much just propaganda. There's so much stronghold in our belief system about what's possible as it relates to our bodies because of science and where it basically where it ends. And I say where it ends because I really mean what we've collectively accepted as possible based on modern day research and what's out there. And we don't really know what's out there, right? Only what's presented to us and only what's presented to the people that we have on our healthcare team, so on and so forth. But people like Dr. Joe are doing the work in terms of the research that helps us understand beyond what we've known. Part of what he talks about as some of the key takeaways is epigenetics. He says that epigenetics proves that your thoughts and your emotions actually influence your gene expression. And the first time I heard him talk about this, and it wasn't in Becoming Supernatural, I think I saw a podcast, my mind was blown because I work in the healthcare field and I've been hearing for years genetic testing, genetic testing, genetic testing. And while I truly believe in genetic testing, I believe it's important to understand the genes that you've inherited, right? But I think genetic testing means nothing if you don't understand epigenetics. And I'm going to tell you why. Epigenetics is basically how your environment and your lifestyle influence your gene expression. It influences how your body reads your genes. And so, no, it doesn't change your genes. So, if you go get genetically tested, epigenetics is not to say that your genes are all of a sudden going to be changed. But it is to say that when you're experiencing dysregulation in your nervous system, you are down regulating your genes or you're turning off the genetic expression of particular genes. When you feel elevated emotions, you're doing the opposite. You're turning on genes and you're turning on the genetic expression of the genes that are helpful. And so this is what I learned about epigenetics, and it blew my mind because so many of us accept and surrender to the idea that I'm doomed by whatever is in my genes or it runs in the family. Child, when I tell you I no longer live by that slogan, I don't give a damn what's been in the family. It stops with me. Drop a comment in the comment section if you truly believe what I just said. It don't matter what was in your family, baby. It stops with you if it's not to your liking, if it's not to your standard of what you know is possible. Absolutely not. And epigenetics shows that your environment, including your thoughts and your emotions, can turn your genes on and off. He also talks about how your genes don't control your destiny, your perception does. So that to me was a paradigm shift because here it is, I'm just thinking, manage your thoughts for the sake of thinking positive so you can attract whatever it is you're thinking about, not realizing the physical part, my body. We are mind, body, and soul. I left out the body part because I thought I was mastering the mind, conditioning my mind to think certain ways and affirmations and all the things. And I just knew that my soul was like being illuminated and enlightened because of all the things that I was doing and how I was being. But I also didn't consider the physical part. And that's what I think is truly missing from the esoteric teachings of, and even religion in a lot of ways, because they don't really teach us how our body functions and how we can have dominion over the functioning of our body in more ways than we realize. So, by changing your internal state, by learning how to regulate your nervous system, you can literally change your biology. This is what Dr. Joe teaches. So, in other words, we're not doomed by our genes, we are destined to be more. And so, part of my reflection was that it dismantled learning about epigenetics, dismantled the belief that this runs in the family, as I talked about, and that this is my fate because of that. And Dr. Joe saying, you're the signal your body has been waiting for. Your future self isn't a mystery, it's coded inside you. That was all I needed to know that this work was for me. That's all I needed. That permission slip was it. And on that note, someone asked a question. They said, does this mean I can heal physical illness just by thinking differently? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. And I think that thinking is not enough. And I think that's exactly what Joe is trying to tell us, that it's not enough to think positive, right? Because your physical conditioning has a lot to do with how you think. If you've been conditioned through your trauma, then you got to understand that your trauma is also influencing your thoughts because there's a thought and emotion loop that happens with this conditioning. So it's not just your thinking, it's about consistently changing your emotional and energetic state. And that's what triggers the chemistry for healing. So if you're no longer triggering, or as Dr. Joe says, firing and wiring the same emotional patterns, the same thought and emotion loop in your body, then whatever you might be experiencing physically, for example, if you recondition your body, your brain and body to respond differently to your life, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see those changes show up in your genetic expression and what your body is capable of doing. So Joe talks a lot about this in parts 1 through 3, but mainly part 3. If you haven't watched that, please go watch that because that is the blueprint for why we're even doing this work. It's not magic. It's not a magic trick. It's a science of embodiment. It's a science because you're deciding moment to moment, circumstance by circumstance, person by person. Um, you know, it's a choice. It's a constant re-choosing. Do I want to be the same old version of me? Do I want to think this way? Do I want to feel this way? Or do I want to be this version of me who doesn't think this way, but instead thinks like this? Who doesn't feel that way, but instead feels like this? And it's a re-choosing and a returning of sorts. And it's possible, and people are doing it. I told you guys to check out the stories of transformation over on Dr. Joe Dispenza's YouTube channel. They will blow your mind. I watch them every single day. I've probably seen thousands of them at this point because I watch multiple per day because I feel like it's really good to remind myself of possibility often. Again, repetition is the key foundation of all learning. So if you constantly put limitation in front of you, then you're going to believe in limitation. I constantly put possibility in front of me. So I naturally will begin to believe in possibility. And I highly encourage anyone who's watching this, who's keeping up with this schedule of my readings and going live, to please put in front of yourself the possibility of what it is you want to experience, of what it is you're curious about. If you can just find one example of what it is you're looking for in this world, or what you're curious about, or what rockets of desire you've sent out, all you need is that one example. Dr. Joe says it all the time. Like, once we got the example that someone can run 1 mile in 4 minutes, that was all humanity needed to know that it's possible to run a mile in 4 minutes. We call it the 4 minute mile. But one person did it, the world saw it, and then many others did it after that. Same with Dr. Joe's teachings. He got a few people to have a testimonial, others saw it, and then you got exponential more testimonials of what's possible and what people are healing and what they're manifesting from doing this work. And so I highly recommend it. That's why, again, that's why we're here. That is why I am here. That's why I'm doing this series. And my deepest prayer intention behind doing this series is that I don't care if it's 5 to 10 years from now and my YouTube channel is still up and running, and I've evolved well beyond this book, which I think I'll probably revisit this for many, many years to come. It'll always be a part of my wisdom collection. But I don't care how many years down the line it is that someone can find this and see themselves in me, or see themselves in just the journey. Um, Having me read the chapter by chapter, making it easier for them to navigate instead of just listening to an audiobook. Having these engaging conversations, even if it is after my lives and the replays and the comment sections on social media, the dialogue. I don't care when they find it. I just know that I'm doing it because I feel called to do it. And it's a part of someone's journey. In my last live, someone said that they started meditating because of my readings of this book. They got to all 5 parts of chapter 1, and they basically said, "Thank you for uploading this because I started meditating every day now." And I'm so happy I am. And so if I could just reach a handful of people, or however many is intended for this message, if it's hundreds of thousands or millions, do your big one, God. And so, guys, that's pretty much all I have for my notes. Tonight's takeaway is this: you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are being. And who you're being is made up of your thoughts, your emotions, and your energetic signature. And if you want a new future, you must become the new version of you now, in the present moment. That's where your power lives. So if you haven't already, go back and watch part 1 on YouTube, part 1 and 2 actually on YouTube, 1, 2, and 3. I'm tripping. But 1, 2, and 3. And make sure you're subscribed so you can catch parts 4 and 5, which will be uploaded probably, what's today? Tuesday, probably on Wednesday. And if you're watching this, it'll probably be uploaded if you're watching this well after. But we're going to go live again on Friday to discuss parts 4 and 5. So join me again live on Friday, this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, here on YouTube. I've been trying to go live on TikTok, by the way, but they have this thing where they verify your age, that you're 18 or older. They make you upload either a credit card, they'll charge your card, or they make you pose with your state ID or license in the United States. And so I did that process, and it was supposed to take 24 hours. It's taken longer. My guess is they're probably monitoring my page because there's some interesting things going on between the US and China. And we know TikTok is owned by China. So, yeah. But it asked me to do it again. So I'm going to try it one more time. But in the meantime, I'll just be going live here, which is totally fine. I'm fine with it. But yeah, I'll break down parts 4 and 5 of chapter 2, where we talk about stress hormones, we talk about scattered energy, and how to call your power back. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're becoming supernatural, and you're not alone. I pray you find community here. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is your reminder, and you got this. Thank you guys. See you next time.